Billionaire Under the Christmas Lights by Hannah Jo Abbott. Chapter 1. Jordan Bradford wished he could be anywhere besides his stuffy office on the 14th floor of the high-rise building. More specifically, he would rather be in Africa, sweating bullets as he supervised the digging of a brand-new well for clean drinking water. He sighed, knowing there were plenty of people who would call him ungrateful. He had been born into a family of wealth, and he had been given opportunities many people didn't. He didn't mean to be ungrateful. It was just that his insides churned knowing there was work he could be doing out there in the real world. The chilly December wind swept through the bustling streets of the city, carrying with it the promise of snow and the festive spirit of Christmas. But for Jordan Bradford, this time of year held a different meaning. As he stood staring out the large picture window in his office, he couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. Everything about Christmas in North Carolina was a stark contrast to a place where people needed food, water, and basic medical care. Sometimes he felt like the nonprofit he ran didn't do enough, and he was just stuck sitting at his desk going over reports. His nonprofit, Oasis Health Africa, had been his dream for years, but he had underestimated the amount of office hours he would put in. A quick knock drew his attention, and his assistant opened the door. "Mr. Bradford, your brother is here to see you." Jordan cleared his throat and straightened his tie as he moved to take a seat at his desk. "Hey Logan, what's up?" Logan walked into the room, every inch of the professional businessman he had become. If Jordan had to guess, his suit probably cost more than some people's monthly mortgage. "Just came by to say hello and see how things are going." Jordan raised one eyebrow. Logan never came by just to check in. He lifted a stack of papers. "I'm going over some of the numbers for the nonprofit this year." "And?" Logan asked, leaning forward. Jordan shrugged. "It's mostly just giving me a headache. I started this because I wanted to help people, not because I wanted to do paperwork. But on paper, it doesn't look like we've done that well this year." He hated saying those words, as if he were talking about a business with income. "Anything I can help with?" "I'm sure it will be fine. We're still young and growing, so I know it won't be perfect yet." He almost regretted telling his successful, business-minded brother that anything might be wrong. "How's work?" "Work is fine, just busy. Eva's been trying to get me to go to the inn for a weekend, but I can't leave right now when we have so much going on at the end of the year." Logan had been running the family publishing company for a few years now. It was the source of their family's large income with a large collection of magazines and book publishers. "But you enjoy it?" Jordan asked. Logan nodded. "I do. You know, I always wanted to work at the company, even when I was a little kid. I'm glad Eva has taught me not to be a workaholic, but I'm still happy to go to work every day." "That's nice," Jordan said. It wasn't that he didn't like going to work. He just wished he got to do the hands-on work more often than he had to stare at a computer screen. "Which reminds me," Logan said. Jordan knew this meant he was ready to talk about the real reason he was here today. "We haven't asked for much since you stepped down from your position at the company 2 years ago, but you are still a member of the board. Several of the board members have voiced concerns about you missing the last few board meetings." "Well, I offered to be there by video conference, but my connection wasn't great that day," Jordan said. "That's because you were out of the country, which is becoming more and more common." Jordan shrugged. "I like being out of the country." Logan leaned back in the expensive leather office chair and crossed his arms in front of him. Jordan could see him flexing one hand and releasing it over and over, his tell that he was frustrated but trying to keep from losing his temper. "I know you like your charity work, and we're happy for you to do that. But you need to find a way to do it and still be part of the family company and come to board meetings." Jordan didn't even try not to roll his eyes this time. "Why do you need me there? I don't make any decisions, and I don't know what they're talking about half the time." "Part of our agreement in supporting Oasis Health Africa is that you remain on the board and you participate as a member of the Bradford family, which also means coming to our Christmas event in a few weeks. I don't think I need to remind you that it's this company and our family that allows you to be in this position. Even if you would rather be doing your charity work, the company and your earnings from it are what allows you to do this work." No, He certainly didn't need to remind Jordan of that. Jordan would give up almost every bit of the lifestyle that came with his billions. The grand parties, the lavish vacations, and the never-ending business meetings. He had always wanted something more meaningful, something that would make a difference in the world. But without the money that came with his position, how could he continue the work he really wanted to do? They even let him have this office space in the Bradford Publishing Building for Oasis Health Africa. He wouldn't have been able to afford anything this nice if he was just starting out. Jordan sighed and nodded to Logan. "All right, I'm sure my assistant has the next meeting on my calendar. I'll be there." "Great." Logan stood up. "That's all I'm asking." Jordan knew it didn't sound like much, and he could agree to his brother's request. But he couldn't help but wish he could do the work he wanted to do without the pressure of the family name and money behind him. Across town, in a cozy but cramped apartment, Holly Matthews was hunched over her cluttered kitchen table, sketching ideas for her next interior decorating project. The table was strewn with fabric swatches, paint samples, and design magazines. She loved the colors, textures, and little bit of a mess that spoke to her passion for the craft. But she scrunched her face, remembering that this project was only in her imagination, with no real client. She sighed, knowing it was all a sign pointing to the struggle she faced in getting her business off the ground. Holly had always dreamed of becoming a successful interior decorator. Even as a teenager, when she helped decorate her parents' home and her aunt and uncle's house, everyone said she had a keen eye for design and a talent for creating spaces that felt like home. But the competitive world of interior design in a big city had dampened her spirits. For a few years, she had worked at an upscale firm, working herself to the bone as their client base grew. But her pay and position in the company didn't change, and she grew more unhappy with the company atmosphere. She was ecstatic the day she decided to strike out on her own. But despite her best efforts, she struggled to secure enough clients to sustain her business. With a sigh, Holly set aside her sketches and gazed out of her apartment window. The city was alive with holiday lights, and she couldn't help but be drawn to the magic of Christmas. It was her favorite season and the best time of year to be working on design. She wished she could bring that magic into her clients' homes, but it seemed like an impossible dream. Her phone rang and she gasped, grabbing it to check the caller ID. Maybe it was a client calling. She had only put out business cards and flyers about Christmas decorations in 100 different stores and offices in the area. She closed her eyes in disappointment and answered her best friend's call. "Hey, Lisa," she said sadly. "Hey to you too. Don't sound so happy to hear from me." "I'm always glad to talk to you. I was just hoping you were someone calling who wants to hire me." "Aw, I'm sorry, girl. Don't give up yet. All you need is one job to really get your name out there and launch your business." "I know, but how am I going to get that one job? I've done literally everything I can think of to advertise without blowing every penny I have." "I told you, I gave your card to my cousin who is a business manager. He has a handful of clients with giant houses just waiting to be decorated." "But who is going to hire me? Those rich people can pick from a dozen larger firms in the area. Why would they want to go with someone who is struggling to get just one client?" "You never know," Lisa said. "What I do know is that I've only got until the end of the year. If I can't secure enough clients for December and January to pay my rent and bills, I'm going to have to go back to work at the firm." "Will they hire you back?" Holly dropped her head onto her arm on the table, knowing it was the last thing she wanted. "I'm pretty sure they will. I tried my best to leave things on good terms, and Mrs. Smitherman practically laughed at me when I said I wanted to start my own company. She told me good luck, but if things didn't work out, they would keep the door open for me." That means they know how talented you are and that they would be crazy not to hire you back, which is an even better reason for you to work for yourself. You have all the skills you need, and you can make a go at this. Like I said, don't give up. One client is all it takes to get your foot in the door. Holly held her head up. "I know you're right. I hope I can get that one client. All I need is a Christmas miracle." Chapter 2. Afternoon sun streamed through the window as Jordan sat in the coffee shop down the street from Bradford Publishing. His business manager, Richard, never understood why he didn't want to meet in his own office. But Jordan never considered himself a businessman, Anything he could do to move away from that image was a win in his book. He only wore professional attire on the days he worked at the office because it was expected. Logan would have pretty strong words for Jordan if he showed up in any less. He would much rather be in jeans and a t-shirt, which he was when he worked from home. Richard, on the other hand, was always a professional. That's why Jordan hired him. He guessed someone helping with his affairs needed to be. He had told Richard many times he didn't have to wear a suit and tie just to meet with him, but to no avail. Logan is upset that I haven't been at the board meetings lately. Richard nodded. He could be a man of few words. Jordan sipped his coffee and remained quiet. Well, it is part of your job, Richard finally said. I know, it just seems pointless. They have Logan. He's the one in charge. What do they need me there for? You have valuable input, and if they need to vote on something, you need to be there to have a say. Yeah. Jordan waved a hand in the air as if pushing the business talk away. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that. What do you have for me today? Richard smiled knowingly. You want to talk about Africa? I always want to talk about Africa, Jordan said. Very well. Richard opened up the folder he pulled from his briefcase and laid a number of papers on the table. These are the proposed expenditures for next year. While Jordan wasn't that focused on the numbers, he knew it was important for the success of the nonprofit. He leaned over the pages with interest, hoping there was some good news coming. For several minutes, Richard went over the balance sheet, donations, as well as the expenses. Are we on target for the new well in January? Richard grimaced. We're not where we hope to be by now. Jordan sighed. Let me know the difference. I can cover it. Richard folded his hands and placed them on the table. Mr. Bradford, I know you can foot the bill, and it's noble of you. However, our fundraising efforts haven't been great this year. We've lost a number of sponsors in the fourth quarter. That's not completely abnormal. People have a lot of expenses this time of year. Inevitably, we will have a number of donations the last week of the year. But I really think we could do more. Jordan sat up straight and rubbed his chin. What do you have in mind? You always talk about wanting to do something meaningful, especially around the holidays. People are used to being busy, spending money, and going to events. Why not take that and turn it into something positive for the charity? Jordan slowly nodded, still not sure he was seeing the whole picture. Okay, how do we do that? I think we should host a fundraiser event. Jordan inwardly groaned. He would rather spend every cent from his bank account than get dressed up and hobnob with wealthy people for an entire evening. Seriously? He asked. I think it would be the best bang for our buck. It needs to be big, and if we charge per ticket, we can make it quite an event. With your name attached, it can be one of the highlights of the season. I don't know. It sounds like a lot of work and probably costs a lot of money to put on. Couldn't we just spend that money directly on the project? You know, I hate the idea of frivolous spending when there are so many needs. Richard held his hands in front of his face and pointed his index fingers into a triangle, tapping them together as he looked like he was thinking of how to convince Jordan. I understand how you feel. Jordan was sure he didn't agree with his feelings, but at least he was trying to work with them. The thing is, if you donate the money, we can get the project done, and maybe for the next one, you can donate, and we can get it done. But there is a point where you can't be the only person behind the financing. Yes, I know that an event like this would be money spent on things that aren't important to you. It's not about the event and the things themselves. It's about getting people together and getting them to buy into your vision. If you can accomplish that, and if you share your passion and the reason behind the project, then you can create a group of donors who will help the charity grow far beyond you. We want it to be taken care of in a way that when you are gone, it can live beyond you as a stable and successful organization. Jordan gave him a wry smile. You always know just how to hit me in the right spot, don't you? Richard drummed his fingers on the table as he sat up straight in excitement. It's my job to help you manage your affairs. I only want what you want. But since this charity work is something you're passionate about, my goal is to help you do it the most effectively. Okay, but let's say I agree. I wouldn't have the faintest idea where to start planning an event like that, Jordan said. You can leave that to me. An event planner can handle the details. You just need to say agree with or veto some of the options. I guess it's worth considering. But where would we host it? Surely the places that are designed for that kind of thing are booked up in advance, especially at this time of year. Richard smiled. How about your house? It's spacious, has plenty of parking, and it would be a stunning backdrop for the event. Jordan hesitated. His house was nice, of course, but for lack of a better word, it was empty. It was just him in the house, and he spent most of his time working or in Africa. Not to mention, he didn't like to spend money on things that didn't matter that much. That left his home nearly devoid of personal touches. My house. It's not very festive there. I don't even have a Christmas tree. How could we have a Christmas event? Richard held up an index finger. I've got a solution. How about we hire an interior decorator to transform your house into a winter wonderland? It will make the charity event even more spectacular. Jordan considered the idea, his skepticism giving way to cautious optimism. At this point, he didn't have much argument last. All right, Richard, find someone good, but make sure they can work their magic quickly. Christmas is approaching fast. Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. I've got just the person in mind. Her name is Holly Matthews, and she comes highly recommended. My cousin Lisa is her best friend. Her firm is new in the business, but she's worked in decorating for years, and everyone says she's incredibly talented. Jordan took the business card, eyeing it with interest. Fine. Call and see if she's available. You'll need to give her a key to the house. I won't have time to oversee the decorations. Richard clapped his hands, as if he had completed quite a feat. Consider it done, Jordan. I have a feeling this Christmas charity event is going to be something truly special. Jordan agreed with a reluctant nod. He wasn't too sure about it, but if Richard thought this is what they should do to increase the budget and be able to do more work, he would give it a try. Even if it meant having his house decorated, along with smiling and talking to people. He only hoped this Holly Matthews was a miracle worker. Chapter 3. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city when Holly Matthews parked her modest sedan in front of the luxurious house that was Jordan Bradford's home. It was early, but she wanted to get a head start on making a plan for decorating the enormous house. Sure, she had decorated large homes before, but nothing on this scale. And then she had the backing of a large firm and multiple assistants. Butterflies danced in her stomach as she clutched the key Richard had given her the day before. She was ecstatic when Richard called her and asked if she would be available for the project. When she said yes, she didn't bother to tell him that she couldn't possibly be any more available. Then, he said the words that stopped her dead in her tracks. Jordan Bradford. Holly had nearly dropped the phone on the floor in her apartment. Not Jordan Bradford. The Jordan Bradford. Anyone who lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, knew who the Bradford family was. But Holly wished she could forget him entirely. Not that he knew who she was anyway. Even though they had gone to high school together and been to dozens of the same functions, the rich, popular Jordan wouldn't remember a nobody like Holly. If she didn't need this job so badly, she might have turned it down. Then again, maybe she wouldn't even have to see him. Richard had given her the key and told her Mr. Bradford didn't need to be bothered. That suited her just fine. As Holly walked towards the entrance, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was a big opportunity for her, and she was determined to make the most of it. She had only met Richard briefly, but he said she had been highly recommended and assured her that this project could be a game-changer for her budding interior decorating business. With a deep breath, Holly inserted the key into the lock and pushed the door open. As she stepped inside, her eyes widened in awe as she took in the grandeur of the house. The foyer held a gorgeous curved staircase with a dark-stained handrail, but she was immediately drawn into the large grand room. The ceiling soared to a height of at least 15 feet, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the backyard that went on as far as she could see. It was, however, sparsely decorated, giving it a cold, impersonal feel. Moving through the house, she looked through the living room, dining room, and kitchen. She wouldn't even guess at the square footage of the space. It was one of the largest houses she had ever been in. She bit her lip thinking that the house she grew up in probably would have fit inside the living room and kitchen. The single couch probably cost more than all the furniture her parents owned. Holly had never wished to be rich, and her parents had made it painfully clear that they were anything but. She grew up wearing second-hand clothes and shoes that were past their prime. Now she was standing in the house of a man who could literally buy anything he wanted. She couldn't complain. Living in a house with minimal possessions is what drove her to create beautiful spaces in the first place. When she was in middle school, she would use scrap fabric and flowers from the yard to design a centerpiece for the kitchen table. Her parents would rave over it, and Holly glowed with pride. From that first time, her passion grew to change drab, dull houses into homes of comfort and beauty. Still, it was hard to ignore the contrast in her own situation in life and that of the man who lived in this home. But that wasn't for her to think about right now. She had a job to do. Holly's first order of business was to take pictures and measurements so she could start planning the transformation. She had her camera and notepad ready, and she began to move through the rooms methodically, snapping pictures and jotting down notes. The house was like a blank canvas, and she could already envision the holiday magic she could bring to this space. Holly was just making her way into the kitchen when she heard the scuffle of footsteps in the next room. She clutched her camera to her chest and took a few quiet breaths, making sure she had really heard a noise. She shook her head. Of course, she had been given a key and freedom to roam the house. Surely other people who worked for the wealthy man had access to the home. She pasted on a smile and prepared to greet the person and introduce herself. She couldn't have been prepared for what she would see around the corner. Holly gasped as she entered the kitchen. Jordan Bradford stood at the counter, reaching for a coffee cup in a cabinet. When he heard her, he turned. Holly couldn't avert her eyes. He looked the same as he did in high school, only older and more attractive, if that was even possible. She saw he wore sweatpants and no shirt. His dark hair was tousled, and he sported the kind of bedhead that could only result from a night of restless sleep. He rubbed his eyes and stifled a yawn just before he laid eyes on her. He froze and almost dropped the coffee cup. He managed to catch it in two hands. His voice was gruff when he spoke. "Who are you, and what are you doing in my house?" Holly jumped, her heart racing as she tried to remember what she should say. Her cheeks flushed pink as her gaze stayed on him, shirtless and far more handsome than she had allowed herself to remember. I'm Holly Matthews," she stammered. "I'm here to, decorate for the Christmas charity event. Richard, your business manager, sent me." Jordan blinked, clearly taken aback by Holly's presence and the realization that he had forgotten about the decorator's arrival. He appeared to quickly process the information as he ran a hand through his disheveled hair. He showed no hint of recognition of her or her name. "Right. Sorry, Richard told me. I just didn't expect anyone here so early. I was up late in the night on a call to Africa." Holly could see the weariness in Jordan's eyes and softened her tone apologetically. "I'm sorry for the early intrusion. I wanted to get a head start on planning. I can come back later if you would like." Jordan sighed, his irritation seeming to melt. "No, it's fine. Just do whatever you need to do with the house. I want people to come and support the mission of the charity. I'll just be in my office." With that, Jordan turned and walked away, leaving Holly alone in the spacious kitchen. She watched him go as she put her hand to her chest to calm her racing heart. As she expected, he didn't remember her, and maybe that was for the best. If he went back to his office, she could get to work and try to pretend he wasn't even there. She took a few deep breaths and forced herself to focus. This was going to be a big job, and she didn't have long to make it happen. She would have to work day and night to get the house ready. She continued through the house, taking pictures and making notes. It was easy to imagine Christmas colors and lights here, candles and wreaths there. Making her way up the stairs, far away from the office Jordan Bradford had disappeared to, she found even more soiree footage. There were 4 large bedrooms each with their own bathroom and a bonus room with the biggest television she had ever seen. She made a note to ask if he wanted Christmas decor for those rooms as well. She couldn't wait to get started with the makeover. But her mind wandered to Jordan. She wasn't sure what she had expected in the adult version of him, but this Jordan Bradford was not it. Then again, who expects to show up for a job and see a billionaire walking around in sweatpants? Holly shook her head. This was no time to be thinking about him. She needed to keep her focus on the job if she wanted to get it done in time and help grow her business. She could only hope he would stay in his office and let her get her work done. Chapter 4. Holly stood perched atop a ladder, carefully arranging a string of twinkling lights on the massive Christmas tree that dominated the living room of Jordan Bradford's house. The scent of freshly cut pine filled the air as she worked, and the room was slowly being transformed into her vision of Christmas in his home. As she meticulously weaved the lights through the branches, Holly couldn't help but hum along to the Christmas carols playing softly in the background. She was in her element, doing what she loved most, bringing the magic of the holiday season to life through her decorating. A smile played at her lips as she lost herself in the moment. The grandeur of the tree had been her biggest challenge in the house. It was taller and wider than any she had ever worked on before. Thank goodness she had found a Christmas tree lot willing to deliver and set up the giant. It had cost more, but with the budget she had been given, it wasn't really a problem. With each step up the ladder, she had to stretch further and further to reach the branches. Holly's fingers maneuvered the lights with expertise, but she didn't realize that the ladder had shifted slightly on the polished floor. Just as she reached out as far as possible, the ladder wobbled precariously, and Holly gasped, clutching the tree for support. The string of lights slipped from her hand, and she watched in horror as it unraveled and fell, forming a tangled mess of wires and bulbs around her. "Great," she muttered to herself. Her happy holiday spirit turned to frustration as she tried to untangle the mess while still standing on the ladder. Holly gently moved down the steps one at a time, the strands winding more tightly around her each step. Then, just when she thought she could make it, the ladder tipped ever so slightly. Holly gasped and desperately waved her arms, trying to find something to grab onto. The only thing close enough was the tree, and she squeezed her eyes closed as she managed to grab hold of a branch. Then all around her, the world tilted as she began to fall, and the terrible sound of a crashing Christmas tree echoed through the house. Holly lay there for a few moments, not moving. She tried to lift the tree off of herself, but it was too heavy. She bit her lip and wasn't sure if she should call out for help. All morning she had hoped Jordan would stay hidden in his office, and he had. Now she needed help, and she couldn't decide if it would be worse for him to find her here or to be stuck under the tree all day long. There wasn't long to think about it, since she heard footsteps coming down the hallway. He must have heard the racket and was coming to see what the noise was. As he entered the living room, he froze in his tracks. For a moment, he seemed to take in the scene with Holly, trapped under the tree and tangled in a colorful web of lights. Holly's cheeks were hot with embarrassment as she looked up and met Jordan's amused gaze. "Well, this wasn't exactly part of the plan," she said. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "Yes, I think so. Nothing broken. I just can't move." Jordan quietly chuckled as he approached her, and she couldn't blame him. "I see you found yourself in a bit of a tangle." Holly nodded, her lips curving into a smile despite her predicament. "Yes, it looks like it. I promise, I'm usually much more graceful with Christmas lights." Jordan knelt down beside her and began to tug at the wires. "Don't worry, we all have our moments." As they worked together to free the lights, their fingers occasionally brushed, and Holly couldn't help but notice how warm and comforting Jordan's presence was. His laughter and easygoing nature were a pleasant surprise, given his initial gruff demeanor. Finally, Jordan reached over to lift the tree as Holly crawled out from under it and stood, brushing pine needles off herself with both hands. "Thank you, Mr. Bradford," she said. "Please call me Jordan. I can't stand being Mr. Bradford." "Of course. Thank you, Jordan. I don't know how long I might have been stuck under there if you hadn't come." "You're welcome, Holly. Consider it my contribution to the decorating effort." They worked together to set the tree back in its place. It was no small effort, and they both were out of breath by the time it was settled. "Holly," Jordan repeated as he tilted his head. "Holly Matthews. That name sounds familiar. Have we met before?" Holly wasn't sure if she was relieved or terrified that the truth would come out, but a tiny part of her was thrilled he at least remembered her name. "Actually, we have." "Really? Where?" She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and glanced at the floor. "We went to high school together." Jordan's eyebrows shot up and his hand went to cover his open mouth. "No way. At Oakhurst Preparatory School? Mm-hmm, Holly said, nodding. She watched him as the realization washed over his face. We competed in the science fair together. Now it was Holly's turn for her mouth to fall open. Yes, we did. I didn't think you would remember. That was the best project. We won second place, didn't we? That's right. But then the first place team was disqualified because they had hired someone to do the research, so we technically won first. Jordan laughed. I didn't remember that part, but that sounds like something that would happen at Oakhurst. Wow, Holly Matthews. Well, it's great to see you again. You should have told me who you were yesterday. Holly let out a nervous laugh. It didn't quite seem appropriate at the moment. Jordan put a hand to the back of his head, and she thought she saw a slight shade of pink. Oh, right. I was a little startled to find you in my kitchen, but I'm glad to know who you are. It's been a long time. Yes, a very long time, Holly said quietly. So now you do decorating projects instead of science projects. Well, science was never really my thing. I got lucky with that project. Then maybe I got lucky to have you here to decorate. Holly felt her own cheeks flush, but told herself not to let the compliment get to her. Well, now that was a workout, she said, pointing at the Christmas tree. I think I'll move on to another area for now. The tree probably needs a break. I promise I won't fall off the ladder again. Jordan chuckled. I'm glad you can find humor in the situation. Just in case, I'll be around if you need me. Just yell if you get trapped under anything else. Holly couldn't help but chuckle at Jordan's comment, and as she turned to leave the room, she felt a strange sensation wash over her. She wasn't sure if it was the adrenaline from the fall or something else entirely, but she suddenly felt very aware of Jordan's presence. As she wandered off to the next room, she found herself still thinking about Jordan. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was something about him that was very different from the boy who had hurt her feelings in high school. Of course, people change and they were older now. Still, something about him surprised her. Maybe it was the way he had helped her without hesitation, or that he seemed to have a soft spot for the holiday season, despite his initial reluctance to decorate. Whatever it was, Holly couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Jordan than she had thought back then. As the day wore on, Jordan seemed to find his way to whatever room she was working in. He asked questions about the colors she chose and how she made design decisions. His tone was kind, and Holly appreciated his interest in the project. Before she knew it, he was helping in the dining room as she created a tablescape. Holly tried to keep her eyes on her work, but she pressed her lips together in a smirk as she looked over at Jordan. He furrowed his eyebrows and a crease appeared on his forehead as he leaned down to the table to make sure the table runner was exactly in the center. It looks great, Holly said, causing him to look up and smile. Thanks. I just want it to be right. But I'll admit, I've never decorated a table before. Never? She asked. Not even to set a table for a holiday or a birthday? Nah, I can't say that I have. Well, now you have, and you've done a great job. Are you sure I'm not keeping you from work? Jordan waved a hand in the air. There's always more work, but I didn't want to sit cooped up in the office anymore. This is a nice distraction from the reports my brother sent me for the board meeting next week. Holly handed him a cloth napkin she had rolled perfectly and wrapped in a wooden ring with a sprig of greenery. All right then, you can set one of these on top of each plate. She watched as he took it from her hand and placed it carefully in the correct spot. She didn't know a businessman who would rather set a table than look over reports. There was definitely something different about him now. Chapter 5. Jordan stood in his living room watching Holly add the finishing touches to the towering Christmas tree. She had only been working here for a week, and he was amazed at the transformation in the house, and not just the way it looked. He couldn't help but be drawn into the holiday spirit that seemed to radiate from Holly. Her laughter and passion were infectious, and he found himself eager to experience more of the actual joy of Christmas. It was still hard to believe that a girl he had gone to high school with had ended up decorating his house. What were the chances? And why didn't he remember more about her from back then? He remembered the science project, but he didn't remember that she was this exciting to be around. Holly cast a glance over her shoulder, smirking in a way that told him she was about to say something he didn't like. You know, Jordan, there's one more thing we need to do to make this place truly magical. Jordan raised his eyebrows. Oh, and what's that? Holly grinned as if he was walking right into her trap. We need to decorate the outside of the house with lights. It's the perfect way to spread holiday cheer to everyone who passes by. Jordan hesitated for a moment. The idea of decorating the exterior of his house seemed extravagant. Wasn't this something he had avoided every year? Money spent on decorating could go to serve a bigger purpose. Then again, wasn't all of this supposed to help bring people to the event, which would bring in money for the charity? Besides, the enthusiasm in Holly's eyes was hard to resist. He nodded as he gave in. All right, let's do it. Where do we start? Holly's face lit up as she clapped her hands together in excitement. Great! We're going to need to go shopping. There are some fantastic shops downtown that should have everything we need. Whoa, he said as he held up his hands. I said okay to decorating. Surely you don't need me to go shopping. Holly shrugged. No, I guess not. I can do it myself. I just thought you might like to have some input, and it would be nice to have the company. She tapped her index finger at the corner of her mouth and tilted her head. What do you think about some of those giant inflatable characters for the yard? Jordan rolled his eyes. You would never. Oh, I don't know. I've been known to make some bold decisions. If you're not there, who knows what I might bring back? Fine, he said. I'll go along. But I know nothing about decorating, especially outside. You know what you don't want, and I bet if you try really hard, you can decide what you do want. We can add some personal touches that are particular to you. That's what makes the process fun, and people won't just see a house decorated by a professional. They will see a home decorated with thought and care. Jordan stared at her as she spoke. She said it with such conviction, he believed it must be true. A short while later, they found themselves in his car headed into town. Do you have a favorite Christmas memory? Holly asked suddenly. Jordan kept his hands on the wheel, but briefly glanced over at her. I don't know. Sorry, I wasn't trying to get too personal. I just thought a Christmas memory might help give me a direction to go. A memory can help you decorate? Jordan asked, his skepticism showing on his face. Sure. If your favorite Christmas memory is a year that it snowed on Christmas, and you spent the day building snowmen and having a snowball fight with your brother, we can incorporate snow into the decor. Or if you remember a year when you gave your mom a homemade apron, maybe we use flannel fabrics and ribbon. Jordan laughed. I never made my mom a homemade apron. Holly smiled. I was just giving examples. I forgot you knew about my family. Did you know my brother? Holly gave a sheepish smile. Not really. He was older than me. But you know, people know who you are. I could have found out you had a brother just by doing a little research. So, you're saying you know more about me than I think you do? She shrugged. Mostly only things that are public information. You know, things I could read online. Like a favorite Christmas memory? Holly pointed a finger in the air. Nope, that one I couldn't find. Thus the questioning, Jordan said. You know, I usually have a meeting with my clients in person before I go to work for them. I like to talk with them, get to know their personal style and who they are. That helps me a lot when I'm creating a space in their homes that they will love. We didn't have that meeting since Richard arranged everything. Well, lucky for you, I have no personal style, Jordan said. That's not true. Everyone has a style. Jordan sighed. You've seen my house. Well, I mean the way it was before you started. I have a random collection of furniture and almost nothing on the walls. Honestly, I would have lived in a one-room apartment with a bed and a kitchen. I don't need all the fluff. Tell me more about your charity work. That's what all this is really about anyway, isn't it? Jordan gave one firm nod. Exactly. Since that's what you care about most, tell me about it. I started an organization to take basic medical care and build wells for clean water in Africa. Holly looked at him patiently, as if waiting for him to say more. That's it, he said. I don't think so. There's more to it, Holly said. What made you want to do that, and how did you choose Africa? Jordan laughed as he rubbed his chin. Well, that part is kind of a funny story. I went to Africa the first week of my sophomore year of college. Holly leaned back in surprise. Wait, what? Yeah, you heard me. I should have been starting classes, but I wasn't all that interested in statistics and business management. It's what my parents wanted me to do. Get a degree in business just like my brother. So instead, I booked a flight to the most remote place I could think of, and that was Africa. I just had the clothes on my back and what I carried in my backpack. Holly laughed. I'm guessing your family wasn't happy about that. Not at all. My dad tried to have me picked up and taken to the embassy, but they couldn't find me. I met a group of people there doing mission work, and I asked lots of questions about what they were doing. Turns out they were working with a local church doing a health and dental clinic that week. I tagged along to their location, and that's when I started to learn about the real needs of the people there. Holly's tone was somber as she spoke. What kind of needs? Jordan shook his head. It pained him to think about it. Basic things that we take for granted every day. Healthcare, good food and nutrition, education. But what hit me the hardest was water. Have you ever seen those pictures of women and children carrying buckets of water on their heads? Yes, Holly said. They're pretty iconic, but what they don't show is the miles and miles they walk to get the water, and then they walk the same distance back. And even then, it's not always clean or healthy for them. That's hard to believe, Holly said. Right? All we do here is turn on the tap or grab a bottle of water that costs more than they have in a month. I knew right away I wanted to do something about it. I had lived most of my life ignorant to that kind of need, but once I knew, I couldn't just sit here and let it continue without trying to help. Jordan glanced over at Holly and saw her dab at her eyes. That's really special, Jordan. He laughed, trying to lighten the mood. But it doesn't help you pick decorations for my house, does it? I don't know about that. It's nice to know I'm working for someone who cares so deeply about something. She smiled. Even if that just means he's willing to decorate his house for the cause when he doesn't like the fluff. Jordan laughed. Sounds like you figured me out. They arrived at a shopping center, and Holly pointed out the directions to where she wanted to go. For the next hour, they ventured into quaint, small shops and bustling department stores, exploring aisles filled with an array of Christmas lights, ornaments, and outdoor decor. Holly's eyes sparkled as she carefully examined each item. Her enthusiasm was infectious. She pointed out various options, from classic white lights to colorful bulbs. She also made sure to show him some large inflatables, which he turned down with a laugh. It felt nice that she was teasing him that way. As they moved from store to store, Jordan was drawn into the excitement of it. He hadn't picked out Christmas decorations since he was a kid, but Holly made it so much different. The care she put into her work made him appreciate her. Maybe he had thought decorating was frivolous, but the way Holly did it had so much meaning. The joy of selecting the perfect ornaments, the thrill of finding unique decorations, and the warmth of sharing these moments with someone special. At one small boutique, Holly held up a delicate string of twinkling fairy lights, her face lit with wonder. These lights are like stars in a winter night sky. They'd look perfect draped along the balcony railing. It makes me think of how the stars must look in Africa, where they aren't hindered by streetlights or buildings. Jordan stared at the lights in her hands and nodded in agreement, struck by the beauty of her vision. I know they're the same stars, but it looks completely different there. There's space and air and sky. Perfect, Holly said. That's what we'll do with the outside. We can decorate in a way that is comfortable and homey, but is more simple. Jordan smiled. That sounds great. Once she had her inspiration, Holly took off. She kept them moving around the store, selecting items to match her vision. As they left the last store, their arms filled with bags of decorations, Jordan felt a sense of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. Holly, he said, I have to admit, I never thought I'd enjoy holiday shopping this much. Holly laughed. See? Christmas magic is contagious. As he walked out to the car with her, he was beginning to believe it was true, and that it wasn't just the season making him feel this way, but the person he was with. Chapter 6. Holly stood in the dining room of Jordan's house, carefully eyeing a collection of items on a large, round platter. She bit her lip and sighed. Every arrangement she had tried, probably at least 12 different ways, looked like she had just thrown them together. She crossed her arms now and huffed. She was never this distracted when she worked. At the firm, She had been known for her laser focus in getting a job done. So what was wrong with her now? It couldn't be the man who was working in his office just down the hall. No, she wouldn't let herself think that. Jordan had been great, helping carry the decorations at the store. She would never admit that she was used to shopping with a team or at least one assistant, so she had desperately needed him to tag along. But then, there was the conversation in the car. She had known he cared about the charity. That was the whole reason she was working here. But maybe in the back of her mind, she had thought it was just to keep his image looking good as a wealthy businessman. It wouldn't be the first time someone had used a charity for that purpose. But when Jordan told her his story and why he started the charity, he had pulled at her heartstrings. Holly had thought he was a nice guy in high school. They hadn't been friends, but getting to know him while they worked on the science project together had been fun. Jordan was interested in learning and completing the project, and he made her laugh. That is until the project was over. She should have known better than to think they were actually becoming friends, but she had let herself hope there was something between them. That all ended after they won, and he went back to his own group of popular friends. Still, she had a job to do. And if she wanted this to be the job that launched her company, she needed to get it exactly right. No time for muddling it up thinking about the man she was working for. He was being nice, but she was an employee to him, and she needed to remember that. Holly went back to work with a renewed sense of determination. When she finally had the items positioned the way she wanted, she stepped back to admire her work. "There," she said, finally pleased with the display. "Looks good to me." The sound of Jordan's voice right behind her caused her to jump. "Oh, sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to startle you." Holly pasted on a smile. "That's all right. I just didn't hear you come in." "I was just taking a coffee break and thought I would check in." "I'm glad you like it." Holly turned to look at him for the first time. He sipped his coffee and then drummed his fingers on his mug. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. She furrowed her eyebrows. Was it her imagination, or did he look nervous? Jordan continued staring at the display on the table as if it was the most interesting thing he'd ever seen. He stepped closer and examined it. Finally, he stepped back. "Looks good to me," he repeated himself. "Thanks," Holly said, watching him. Finally, he looked at her and opened his mouth as if he was going to say something. Then he snapped it shut and turned to look out the window. "How are things going outside?" "Fine," Holly said. "The crew hanging the lights should be done soon." "Great," Jordan said. "Great." He held his mug in one hand and stuffed the other hand in his back pocket. "Is everything all right?" Holly asked. "Yeah, sure, of course," he said. "Why?" "Nothing," Holly said. "Just asking." She wanted to say he was being weird, but they didn't know each other well enough for her to be that honest. Jordan rubbed the back of his neck and kept his gaze locked on the floor. "Actually, there is something." Holly watched his face and wondered what could be causing him this distress. Was he unhappy with the decorations, and now he wanted to fire her? Or had he decided to cancel the event, so he didn't need her and just couldn't bring himself to say it? Holly sighed, sure that he had bad news. Still, she wanted to put him out of his misery. She reached out and put her hand on his arm. "It's okay," she said. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I can take it." Jordan looked up and his expression showed his relief. He gave a small smile. "It's not bad news." "Oh, good," Holly said, breathing a sigh of relief. She hadn't actually been sure she could take it if he let her go now. Her entire business was dependent upon this going well. "Then just spit it out." "I have this Christmas gala I have to go to for the company. I would skip it, but my family will be there. And my brother has been on my case about showing up for events." "Okay," Holly drug out the word, furrowing her eyebrows. "So what's the problem?" "I'm expected to take someone, like a +1. He hesitated. "A date." Holly nodded slowly. He couldn't be about to say what she thought he was. He finally looked her in the eyes. "I don't know if it's crossing some kind of line since you kind of work for me, but I was hoping you would like to go to the gala with me." Holly bit her lip. "Oh," she said, looking away from him. In her mind, she flashed back to that year in high school. She had wished every day that he would ask her to go with him to the junior prom. And every day, he didn't ask. Now he was standing here asking her to a big fancy event. Even if it was just because she was the most convenient person to ask, since she was literally in his house, he was still choosing to ask her. Could she put high school behind her for a professional appearance? What if this helped her meet more people who might hire her? She shoved her past feelings deep down and shrugged. I don't see why we can't go to a gala together and still be professional. And she definitely intended to keep it professional. Jordan raised his eyebrows and smiled. So you'll go? Of course, I would love to. The relief on Jordan's face was palpable. Holly couldn't help but feel a little flutter in her stomach as she watched him. Was he really that nervous to ask her? Somehow, that made him even more attractive. Jordan cleared his throat and shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Great, that's a relief. I wasn't sure if you'd be up for it. Holly shook her head. Why wouldn't I be? It sounds like fun. Jordan chuckled, looking relaxed now that he had asked her. I don't know. I guess I'm just not used to asking people who work in my house to go on dates with me. Holly laughed. Well, consider this a break from tradition. Jordan nodded. I will. Holly waved him off. It's no problem. I'm looking forward to it. As soon as the words left her mouth, Holly felt a jolt of excitement run through her. She hadn't been out in ages, and the idea of going to a fancy gala with Jordan was enough to make her heart race. There was a moment of silence between them. Jordan crossed his arms as if he wasn't sure what to say next. Holly looked around the room, trying to think of a way to break the tension. So, is there anything else you need me to do for the event? Holly finally asked, hoping to steer the conversation back to work. Jordan shook his head. No, everything looks great. You've done an amazing job so far. Holly smiled. Thank you, I'm happy to hear that. Jordan took a step closer to her. I'm really looking forward to the event, and having you there with me. Holly felt a flutter in her stomach again. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze. Me too. For a moment they stood close, the only sound the quiet Christmas music playing in the background. Jordan held her gaze with his own and seemed like he might say something more. Then he abruptly stepped back as he cleared his throat. Well, I guess I should get back to my office. A smile played at Holly's lips as she watched Jordan's retreating figure, feeling a mixture of excitement and curiosity about the upcoming gala. Maybe he really did want her there with him. Surely he could have asked any number of women to attend the gala with him. The thought sent a thrill through her, and she put her hand to her chest as her heart beat out a funny rhythm. As he disappeared down the hallway, she turned her attention back to the dining room, determined to focus on finishing the decorating. She meticulously adjusted the placements of ornaments and candles, ensuring everything looked perfect. Everything had to be just right for the event. Not only for the success of her business, but because suddenly, she desperately wanted Jordan to be pleased with her work. Chapter 7. Friday evening, Jordan stood before a mirror, adjusting his tie with a level of care he hadn't exhibited in years. Tonight was the annual Bradford Publishing Christmas Gala. Jordan had never been one to prioritize social gatherings. In fact, he had managed to avoid this particular event the past 2 years. But tonight was different. He was actually looking forward to it. In a matter of minutes, he was out the door and headed to pick up Holly. He couldn't slow himself down if he tried. It surprised him, but he couldn't wait to see her. The past 2 weeks while she had been at the house had changed so many things. Not only the look and feel of his house that she was managing to turn into a home, but for him personally. He had never been so at ease talking to someone. Maybe because he knew people saw him as either someone made of money or someone in a position of professional businessman, neither of which was how he wanted to be seen. But Holly talked to him like he was a regular person. Just Jordan. Not Mr. Bradford. And even though it was true she was doing a job for him, she felt more like a friend than an employee. He wished he remembered more about the time they spent together in high school. The only thing he remembered was that they did the project together, and maybe they had a few laughs. But he was preoccupied with so many things back then. His focus was on keeping his grades up to please his parents, but mostly he was exhausted from keeping up the social appearances. What if this time could be different? Was there a chance for Holly and him after all these years? He cleared his throat and hoped the sound of his heart beating wasn't as audible as it felt as he walked to her door and knocked. The door swung open just moments later, and Jordan's heart skipped a beat as his gaze landed on her. He put his hand to his chest. She was dressed in an elegant midnight blue gown that cascaded to the floor. The dress featured a graceful scoop neckline, striking a perfect balance between modesty and allure. Her hair, that he had only seen in a tight ponytail, now cascaded down her shoulders in soft brown waves, beautifully contrasting her glowing complexion. "You look wonderful," he said. "Thank you," she said, with a slight tint of pink coming to her cheeks. "You look nice, too. You clean up well." "What?" Jordan asked with a teasing lilt to his voice. "You don't like my sweatpants look?" Holly laughed but looked away from him as she said, "You look nice, either way." They didn't waste any time and headed to the car. During the ride to the gala, Jordan and Holly engaged in lively conversation, discussing everything from their favorite holiday movies to their most cherished Christmas traditions. It felt like the most natural thing in the world, sharing stories and laughter with her. When they arrived at the venue, the grand ballroom was aglow with festive decorations and the chatter of guests in their finest attire. Jordan tugged at his tie, feeling like he needed more air. As he did, Holly slipped her hand into the crook of his arm. Just like that, he felt like he could make it through this evening. She should be the one who was nervous, walking into a room full of strangers. But she flashed him a confident smile, seeming to understand the role they were required to play this evening. "Come on," she said. "Let's relax and have fun tonight." Jordan nodded. "That sounds perfect." He looked across the room and pointed. "First things first, we need to say hi to my family." Holly bit her lip and stopped moving forward. "Oh," she said quietly. "What have you told them about me?" "Nothing really." "Hey." He waited until she made eye contact with him. "Don't worry, it will be fine. My parents and brother are hard on me, but they're nice to everyone else." "Well, that's mostly true. My mom is never hard on me. She still thinks I'm her perfect baby son." Holly laughed. "I'm sure your brother loves that." Jordan smirked. "Yep, it's awesome." Jordan noticed Holly's grip got a little tighter as they crossed the room. When they reached his family, he shifted to greet them. She pulled her hand away, and he immediately missed her touch. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping forward to give her a hug and kiss on the cheek. "Jordan?" His mother beamed as she embraced him, but her gaze immediately went to Holly. "This is Holly Matthews," Jordan said, putting his hand to the small of Holly's back as he introduced her. "Holly, it's so wonderful to meet you," Mrs. Bradford said. She moved forward and took Holly's hands in hers for a moment. "You've probably met before," Jordan said. "We actually knew each other back in high school at Oakhurst." "Really?" Mom said. "How wonderful. Holly, thank you for joining us tonight." "I'm so happy to be here. It's a beautiful event." Jordan turned and shook hands with his dad and brother. "Jordan," Logan said. "Son." Dad shook his hand. "Glad you could be here tonight." "Happy to be here," Jordan said, surprised that he meant it. "If you'll excuse us, I promised this lady a dance." Jordan led Holly onto the dance floor. When he turned around to look at her, he couldn't believe he was at the gala with the most beautiful woman in the room. No words were adequate for what he was feeling, so he simply took her hand in his and pulled her to himself as they began to sway to the enchanting melodies of a Christmas waltz. As they danced, Jordan leaned in closer to Holly. His voice was quiet as he spoke. "You know, Holly, I appreciate you coming with me tonight. It's not something I usually enjoy, but having you here makes it special." Holly smiled warmly, her eyes locking with his. "I'm glad you invited me, Jordan. I'm happy to come, and I know you could ask any number of women to come with you. Anyone would jump at the chance." "Oh, I don't know about that. I'm not exactly the charming son winning popularity contests. The females I talk to the most are my mom and my assistants." Holly shook her head. "That's hard to believe. Jordan, you're a great guy. You are so much more than you let on, or let yourself believe. I've seen how much you care about the work you do to help people. You know you don't always have to play the part of a big-shot billionaire. Jordan sighed. I wish you were right about that. But there are a lot of expectations that come with my family, and He paused. The money. Holly finished the sentence for him. He nodded. Yeah? But you can make that what you want it to be. You said yourself that your brother handles things at the company. What if you could do more charity work? I know Africa is important, and you are deeply invested there. But there are things you could do here locally. You could help people here and still handle what you need to at work without having to leave the country for it. His heart skipped a beat, wondering if she had been reading his thoughts. I've been thinking about that lately. There is so much good we could do, and other ways to give back to the community. Holly looked at him, her interest piqued. What are you thinking? He shrugged. That's the problem. I know there's so much to be done. I just don't know the best place to start. So I just let my wheels spin and get nowhere. Every Christmas, I wish we could do something, but I don't know what. Then I let the time go by without doing anything. So let's do something. It might be a rough start, but what if we make this the year you jump in and do it? Jordan stared at her, wondering if it could be possible. I did have one idea of having an event for families in need. We could provide food and gifts and just give them a fun celebration together where they can enjoy time as a family. Holly rapidly blinked and touched the corner of her eye. Jordan, that sounds amazing. But could we pull it off before Christmas? We're cutting it close. I think so. The important thing would be finding a location, getting the word out, and reaching out to the families we can help. Then do some shopping. Jordan tightened his grip on her hand. Would you help me? Holly moved her hand to her chest, and her mouth fell slightly open in surprise. Of course I will. Jordan's tone was intense as he continued. I want to make a difference, Holly, but not just in the business world. I want to give back to the people who need it most. And in that moment, what he wanted most was for Holly and him to do that work together. Holly's eyes shone as she spoke. Let's make it happen. As they enjoyed the evening, hand in hand, Jordan felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. With Holly by his side, the holiday season was becoming more than just decorations and festivities. He could see it as a time of giving and compassion. And in that moment, it meant a deeper connection with the woman in his arms that he cherished more than anything else. Chapter 8. Holly sipped her second, or maybe it was her third, cup of coffee for the day. She sank onto the couch in Jordan's living room and reached for her phone. As she scrolled her list of tasks for both the house decorations and plans for the family charity event, her mind swarmed with even more things to add. Phew, how am I going to get all this done in the next 2 days? She said out loud, even though she didn't expect anyone to hear her. She clicked a few dots to check off tasks on her phone. I can help, Jordan said, walking into the room and taking a seat across from her. Oh, hey, sorry, I thought you were still at the office. I just got back. He held up a cup in his hand. I brought you some coffee, but I see you already have what you need. Holly laughed. Just put it on the table. I might have it later. That bad, huh? She waved a hand in the air and hoped her face said she was taking all this in stride. It's not too bad. I just need to keep working through this list. But I want to be part of it. What can I do? You've already done so much. Getting the word out and finding the families for the event was huge. Jordan scratched his head. Yeah, but honestly, that was mostly my assistant. She contacted a few places, and we had 10 families in an hour. I wish we could help more. I think that's a perfect number to start with for the first year, and because we threw everything together in such a short time. Maybe next year we can do more. Holly stopped when she realized she had said we. She had no way of knowing what her life would be like a year from now. Would Jordan still be in touch? She couldn't assume she would be around to help with an event next Christmas, could she? Still, she had been so impressed with Jordan. He had thrown himself into the preparations with newfound enthusiasm. They had decided to organize the event in record time, knowing that the need was urgent. Local businesses and volunteers rallied to support their cause, and the response was amazing. But it was even more important to her to see how much Jordan cared about the event. Come on, he said. Give me a job to do. Holly smiled at him, her heart skipping a beat at the puppy dog look he gave her. All right. She scanned her list on the screen. We need to purchase gift cards at a few grocery stores and local shops. If I give you a list, can you do that? Absolutely. Jordan stood. Holly quickly sent him a text with a list of cards. Even as she did, she felt the sting of disappointment that it meant he was leaving. I have some gifts to wrap, and I need to call the caterer to give them the final numbers. Jordan checked his pocket for his keys and picked up his phone to look over the list she had sent him. Great. I should be back in about an hour or so. How does Chinese sound? Chinese? Holly repeated, looked up at him in confusion. Yeah, I can pick up some dinner while I'm out, and then I'll help you finish wrapping the gifts. Really? Of course. I told you I want to help, and I'm not going to ask you to keep working on an empty stomach. Holly nodded enthusiastically. Then yes, Chinese sounds great. Alrighty then. I'll be back in a little while. Holly watched him go and couldn't help but smile. Thinking back over the last few weeks, it was hard to believe how her thoughts about him had changed. That first day, she had hoped she wouldn't have to see him much. Now she knew better. Jordan Bradford was one of the most caring men she had ever met, and she wanted to spend more time with him. As promised, an hour later, Jordan returned with a pocket full of gift cards and 2 bags full of Chinese food. Holly looked up from the floor where she sat surrounded by wrapping paper and packages. Whoa, she said. How much food did you get? I forgot to ask what you like, so I just ordered a bunch of dishes. I thought we could share. Perfect. I like all the dishes and can never decide which one. Come on, Jordan jerked his head. Let's eat in the kitchen. Holly stood up and followed Jordan to the kitchen. The smell of the food wafted through the air, making her mouth water. She watched as Jordan opened the bags and set out the different containers of food on the counter. He moved to the cabinet and returned with 2 plates. Dig in, he said, handing her a plate and chopsticks. Holly took a serving of each dish and sat down at the large kitchen table. Jordan joined her, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. This is really good, Holly said, taking a sip of water. I'm glad you like it. I was worried I'd get something you didn't eat. You shouldn't worry so much, Holly said, smiling. You're doing a great job. Jordan returned her smile and took a bite of his food. They continued eating and chatting. You know, Jordan said between bites of chicken, I've been thinking about something. What's that? Holly asked. After this event, I want to keep doing things like this, helping out in the community, giving back. It's been a really fulfilling experience. Holly's heart swelled with pride. That's wonderful. I think it's better for you to help, especially during the holidays when so many people are struggling. Jordan nodded, his eyes lighting up. Exactly. This is exactly the kind of thing I want to do more of. Holly beamed with delight. That's fantastic, she said, taking another bite of food. As they ate, Holly couldn't shake the thought that Jordan was exactly the kind of person she wanted to work with and spend more time around. You've met my family and obviously know about them, Jordan said. Tell me about your family. What do your parents do? Oh. Holly reached for a napkin to wipe her mouth. Her stomach twisted at the idea of telling him about her upbringing. My parents are great. They've always worked hard to take care of us. She cleared her throat. My dad owned a small business, and he drove a school bus. And my mom worked different jobs throughout the years, mostly office jobs. She worked for a doctor's office for a while, a florist once, and some other offices. Jordan smiled. They sound like nice people. He looked back at his food, and she knew what he was thinking. You're probably wondering how we could afford to go to Oakhurst. Holly's voice dropped an octave. Jordan waved a hand and looked up at her. No, that's not my business. I'm sure your parents worked very hard. I was on scholarship, she explained. Me and my brother both. Oh, I didn't know they offered those, Jordan said. Holly nodded. They try to keep it quiet, I think. I loved Oakhurst and the education I got. They didn't want scholarship students treated differently, so they didn't make a big deal about it. That's great. I'm glad they help people out in that way. Yeah, Holly said. She stared at her plate. Even if no one knew she was on scholarship at school, she spent most of her time there feeling like she would never fit in with the wealthy kids who attended. Remembering that Jordan had barely spoken to her after their project was over was a sign that she had been right. "High school is weird," Jordan said suddenly. "What?" Holly said, looking up at him. "High school is weird," he repeated. "You think you know what you're doing, and you've got friends and think you're cool. I know I made plans and had ideas about what life would be like, but then you grow up and realize that it's not really life. You have to move past that and find out who you really are as a person." Holly blinked a few times. "I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think I'm the same person I was back then, and I'm glad for that." Holly processed his words and wondered if he could have been reading her mind. "That's true," she finally said. "I don't think I'm the same either." Jordan reached for her hand and grasped it for just a moment. "I'm just glad that I got a second chance to meet you. I wouldn't want high school Jordan to be all you knew." Holly smiled at him. "I'm glad too." Chapter 9. The day of the local event for families arrived, and Holly had outdone herself. Jordan was still amazed they had found a place to host it, and now the community center meeting room had been transformed into the North Pole. Twinkling lights, festive decorations, and the scent of freshly baked cookies filled the air. All 10 families that had been contacted had agreed to come. As each one arrived, they were greeted and treated to food, games, and a laid-back evening of fun. Jordan, who had always been used to formal business gatherings, was amazed by the genuine warmth and appreciation of the attendees. He watched children's faces light up as they received gifts and listened to their laughter. Holly stood beside him, her eyes shining with pride. "This is incredible, Jordan. Look at those smiles. Not just the kids. You can see the relief on the parents' faces." "I think that has to do with the Santa bags they are going home with to surprise their kids on Christmas morning." "That's true, but that all has to do with you," Holly said. "It's amazing, Holly. I had no idea it would be like this." She smiled at him. "I had a pretty good idea, but it's even better than I thought it would be. You did a great job." Jordan shrugged. "I didn't do much." "You had the idea, and you started it all. Sure, you had help, but this was your project. And you did help with so many of the details and tasks." "I couldn't have done it without you, though." Holly smiled, but moved her gaze across the room. "I'm just happy to be a part of it. It feels like the perfect thing to be doing this time of year." Jordan nodded. "It's exactly the kind of thing I want to be doing. You know, here you can just be yourself, the guy who wants to help people." Jordan looked at her, his eyes reflecting the sincerity of his feelings. "Thank you, Holly. I needed to hear that. That's who I want to be. I want to help people and give back. I've been given so much, and for so long, I've seen that as a burden and a responsibility. You've helped me to see that I can actually take my position and do something good with it." "You were already doing something. Your work in Africa is amazing." "Yes, but I wanted more. The Christmas season is a hard time to see all the fluff and the spending and the parties. I know it's all fun and good, and people aren't really doing anything wrong. I just want to look past it and see the needs and help fulfill them." "I think you've done just that." Jordan realized how close he stood to Holly, and how they had lowered their voices so only the two of them could hear. With all the noise and activity in the room, somehow at that moment, all he could see was her. Their hands brushed against each other, and their fingers intertwined naturally. A moment passed, suspended in time, as they looked into each other's eyes. The connection between them was undeniable, a shared purpose that had brought them closer than ever before. They leaned in, their lips inches apart, the anticipation of a kiss hanging in the air. But just before their lips could meet, a loud burst of yelling exploded across the room. They looked up to see one of the kids laughing with glee at the confetti popper he had popped. Holly laughed as they pulled back from each other. Jordan's heart pounded, but he smiled as he stepped back, remembering where they were. Holly's eyes stayed locked with his as she said, "We should get back to helping." He nodded. "Yes, of course. Always plenty of work to do." Somehow he felt like the moment had been an important one. He connected with Holly better than anyone he had ever known. He felt the sting of disappointment that he hadn't closed the distance between them soon enough, but he felt certain that there would be many more chances for that in the future. Chapter 10. Holly tugged at the heavy necklace she wore, her nerves at an all-time high. The night of the Oasis Health Africa event at Jordan's house had finally arrived. She had worked her fingers to the bone and had triple-checked every single last piece of garland and ribbon throughout the house. Jordan stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a charming smile and a firm handshake. He was impeccably dressed in a black tuxedo, a sharp contrast to the outfit she had first met him in. Holly wore a velvet gown in a deep burgundy red. She had borrowed it from Lisa since she didn't exactly have a closet full of formal attire. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist, and she had lost track of the time she spent at the mirror putting on her makeup. She wanted to look special tonight and had gone with a bold red lip and dramatic eyelashes. Now she wondered if she had made all the wrong choices. She was only the decorator after all. Maybe she shouldn't even be here. Jordan had expected her to come, but he hadn't asked her to be there as his date. Now, as she watched him, she thought about how different he was tonight than at the family Christmas event. Tonight, he was back to the professional businessman persona. Of course, he needed to put his best foot forward as he worked to raise funding for the charity. Still, Holly felt the distance between them and wanted to hide in the back room until it was over. She couldn't help but be reminded of high school. After the short time they spent together, he had gone back to hanging out with his friends and didn't acknowledge her presence in the hallway. She had tried more than once to greet him at school or an event, but he barely acknowledged her before continuing with his own social engagements. Holly had let it hurt her back then. Would now be any different? Maybe it was time for her to move on. Jordan had his own life before she came to decorate his home, and he was likely to return to it without her once the holiday was over. Holly watched from the living room as guests arrived, and Jordan greeted them. With a sigh, she decided to meander through the house. In the dining room, she checked that the candles on the table were just as she had set them. The caterers had moved things around, but she put everything back. She should settle in and fix a plate of food. She had been too anxious that afternoon to eat much of anything. Now her stomach gave a quiet growl as if on cue. She sighed and picked up a plate. Just as she began setting an assortment of cheese, crackers, and fruit on the plate, a familiar voice came up behind her. "There you are," Jordan said. For a brief moment, Holly's heart soared. Had he actually been looking for her? She turned to face him with a broad smile on her face. Her excitement immediately faded as she found him standing nearby with another woman. She looked to be several years older than Jordan. She wore a floor-length gown and some rather expensive-looking jewelry. Undoubtedly, she didn't have to borrow anything she was wearing. "Hi," Holly said, forcing herself to continue smiling. "Holly," Jordan said, "this is Mrs. Susan Wilmington. Her husband is on the Bradford Publishing Board of Directors." Holly reached out a hand. "Very nice to meet you, Mrs. Wilmington." "This is Holly Matthews," Jordan continued. He looked at Holly. "Mrs. Wilmington wanted to know the name of my decorator." "Yes, dear. You've done such a magnificent job here. I wish I had known about you before now. I hired someone this year, but everything they touched is truly terrible." "Holly has incredible talent," Jordan said. "You should have seen this place before. You wouldn't even recognize it now. Holly turned it from practically barren to a magical holiday scene." As the woman continued conversing with Holly, Jordan excused himself and moved to a group of men talking across the room. After talking with Mrs. Wilmington for a while, Holly moved to the living room where more guests admired her work. She graciously handed out her business cards, her heart swelling with gratitude for the opportunity these connections might bring her. But despite the success of the event and the interest in her work, she couldn't shake a sense of unease. Throughout the evening, Jordan seemed distant and professional. Not the warm and easygoing person she had grown accustomed to in the past weeks. It was as if their growing friendship had been replaced by a strictly business relationship. Holly watched as Jordan expertly navigated the room, engaging in conversations with his guests. His confidence and charisma were undeniable, and it became clear to Holly that she couldn't compare to him in the world of business and philanthropy. As the night progressed, she mingled with the guests, her friendly demeanor drawing people in. She received compliments on her work and offers for potential projects, all of which she accepted gratefully. but her mind stayed on Jordan. Holly had believed that her connection with Jordan went beyond the professional realm, that they were friends who shared a deeper understanding, but his distant behavior left her feeling unsure and somewhat defeated. It was nothing like the night they had shared at the community event or the time they spent together, eating Chinese food and laughing while they wrapped presents. That had felt like a joint project for both of them, and they had enjoyed the evening working together. Now she felt like a hired hand who should have stayed behind the curtain. The more she thought about it, the more she wondered what was in store for her and Jordan after tonight. The house decorations were done. They had nothing else on the calendar connecting them, and no commitment between them. Once the night was over, it was likely they would go their own ways. It was a bittersweet realization. She had enjoyed their time together, but they had no other connections. She certainly didn't belong in this world of wealth and business. Later in the evening, Holly watched as Jordan gave a heartfelt speech about the importance of giving back and the impact their charity would have for the people in Africa. She couldn't help but admire him as he spoke. Her heart swelled with pride for him as he wrapped up his talk. Tonight, we have the power to make a difference in the lives of those less fortunate. I thank each and every one of you for being here and for your generous contributions. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Holly couldn't help but feel a surge of pride for her part in bringing the event to life. But as she looked at Jordan, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was merely a guest in his world, a decorator brought in for a specific purpose. As the evening drew to a close, Holly and Jordan found themselves standing together, once again, watching the guests depart. Holly spoke softly as she stood on the porch, ready to leave. "Jordan, you did an amazing job tonight. The event was a complete success." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your help. The house looks incredible. It really made the event." Holly appreciated his words, but was again reminded that she was needed only for her work contribution, not in a personal relationship with Jordan. "I was thrilled to do it," she said. "I should get going. You must be exhausted after tonight." Jordan covered a yawn. "I have to admit that I am. Thanks again. Be careful getting home." Holly forced a smile, her heart aching with a sense of finality. "It was my pleasure, Jordan. I hope the event will make a real difference for your foundation." He yawned again, but didn't reach out to take her hand or pull her in for a hug. Holly turned and walked away, her steps heavy. After all they had shared working alongside each other the last few weeks, she couldn't help but wonder if this was the end of their journey together. Chapter 11. The week before Christmas, Jordan sat in his office but could hardly keep his eyes on his computer screen. His focus had shifted to Africa, and that was exactly where he wanted to be. Still, he had obligations at the office that required his attention. The paperwork side of the foundation beckoned him, pulling him away from the joy of the charity work he was passionate about. Jordan stood and walked to the window in his office. The streets were busy with people running here and there, taking care of last-minute shopping. Jordan frowned, thinking how long it had been since he had talked to Holly. Over a few short weeks, they had spent so much time together, and now it surprised him how much he missed having her around. Of course, she was occupied with her own responsibilities. She had reached out to Jordan only once, and it had been strictly about the house. She had left a voicemail when he missed her call. It said only that she could come take down the decorations whenever he wanted. Her message was courteous and practical, offering to either store the decorations for him in containers or donate them if he didn't want to keep them. There was something about her tone that caught Jordan's attention. It was distant, a departure from the warmth and familiarity they had shared during her time at his house. He couldn't help but wonder if their connection had grown strained. She sounded more professional than personal. His thoughts moved to the moment they shared at the community charity event, and he couldn't help but wonder if he had crossed a line. He had thought and hoped they were on the same page, but maybe he had been wrong. He couldn't take the wondering anymore and marched back to his desk. Grabbing his cell phone, he punched the button to call her. It was several rings before she answered. "Holly Matthews," she said, her tone polite, but not as if she was excited to hear from him. "Holly, it's Jordan." He was sure she had his number stored, but wasn't sure how else to start the conversation. "Hi," she said. I got your message," he said. A short silence hung before she answered. "Great. I just need to know what you want me to do about your house." Jordan hung his head, feeling the disconnect between them. "Of course. Well, we don't have to take them down before Christmas, do we? I thought I would enjoy them a while longer." "No, you can keep them up as long as you would like. I just know you said you never had decorations for Christmas before, and it was all about the event. So I wanted to make sure to offer to get them out of your way as soon as possible." Jordan sensed the hesitance in Holly's voice, a barrier that seemed to have emerged between them. He didn't want to let their connection slip away, not after the warmth they had shared before. He was desperate to bridge the gap between them. "I'd like to keep them up. I'm sorry I never celebrated like this before, but seeing my home this way has made me realize what I'm missing out on. Holly, why don't you come over for dinner sometime this week? We can discuss the decorations and catch up." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Jordan couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. "I'm not sure I have the time, Jordan. I still have a lot of Christmas shopping to do." Jordan couldn't understand the shift in Holly's behavior. Their connection had been strong, and he had enjoyed their time together. But now it seemed as if she was keeping her distance, as if their relationship was only about the work she was hired to do, and nothing between them as friends or something more. "I'm ashamed to admit that I still have several things on my list, too. Why don't we do our Christmas shopping together? It'll be fun, and we can talk." There was a long pause before she said, "Okay." She might have agreed to the idea, but there was still a reluctance in her tone. "All right then, I guess I'll see you tomorrow night." "See you then," Holly said just before she hung up. Jordan went back to work and stared at his computer screen. He told himself she was just busy with her own work, and when they were together in person, things would be how they had been before. Holly scanned the parking lot as she pulled into the mall. There was Jordan's car. She shouldn't be doing this. It would be easier if she just moved on with her life. They were too different. Too many conflicts in their world, and too many zeros in his bank account. She cringed inside knowing she was going shopping with him. He could literally buy anything in the store. He could buy the whole store, for that matter. She would be watching her pennies on the few items she needed and hoping her family and friends understood she was starting a new business. They may have shared some moments of connection and conversation, but their lives were very different. As she parked, she watched Jordan. He must have noticed her pull in because he climbed out of his car and stretched his legs as he waited for her. Goodness, he looked so good in those dark jeans and black sweater. But he could be wearing an ugly Christmas sweater and still look good. Something inside her made her want to cross the parking lot and wrap her arms around his waist and see if he tucked her into an embrace. But she couldn't do that. They had gotten close during their time together, but that time was over. It was a fantasy world to live in, one where he had all the money to fund her business venture, and she could focus on doing what she loved in the company of a charming man. "Hey," Jordan called out as she slowly walked toward him. "Hey," she responded, tugging last year's winter coat a bit tighter around her. "Did you hear it might snow for Christmas?" he asked. "No, I hadn't heard. I don't keep up with the weather forecast too much." Jordan moved toward her, but when they met, they both stood awkwardly, unsure of a greeting. They knew each other too well to shake hands, but Holly wouldn't let herself hug him. Instead, she started walking toward the store. "Who do you need to buy for?" she asked. "My mom." "Really?" Holly asked. "Yeah, I know it's terrible. I just never know what to get her. I want to get her something special, but well..." Jordan's voice dropped off. "She can buy herself anything she wants?" Holly finished for him. "Yeah, sometimes I wonder why we exchange gifts at all." Holly shrugged. "Because it's more than just getting something you want. Like you said, it should be special. It's about someone giving you a gift. That's not the same as buying yourself something." Jordan nodded. "That's what I want it to be. I'm just bad at picking something like that out." They had just entered the doors to the mall, and Holly stopped short and looked at him. "No, you're not. Everything important to you is meaningful. You're just not thinking right." Jordan cocked his head to the side and raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean?" "I mean you're very thoughtful, And you care about the people in your life. You don't want to just buy your mom any gift that will end up in a closet or on a shelf. You want to get something that is special to her and says something about your relationship. You're right. That's exactly what I want. Holly tapped the corner of her mouth with her index finger. I'm sorry to say, you might not find what you're looking for at the mall. Jordan sighed. I don't have much choice. Christmas is only a few days away. I didn't say you couldn't do it, just that it might not happen here. What does your mom value most? That's easy, our family. Mm-hmm. And so what does she want for Christmas? Time together. What about a trip together? We did that once. A couple of Christmases ago, we stayed at this inn for a few days and spent the holiday there. And how did it go? Jordan smiled. Well, that's how Logan met Eva. That sounds good. That part was good, but we fought some on the trip too, because that's when I finally told him I wanted to leave the company to start the foundation. So that's normal for brothers to fight, isn't it? Did your mom enjoy it? She loved it. Not the fighting part, but that we were together. Why not book a trip for her as a present? Jordan scratched his head. That's not a bad idea. It would mean a lot to her, but I would have to coordinate schedules with Logan. So do that. We can sit on a bench right here and look up some places. With all the travel apps you can pull up on your phone, we could have it booked in no time. She didn't add, especially with your unlimited funding ability. Jordan stared at her with a look of admiration. Holly, you may never cease to amaze me. You say I'm thoughtful, but you're talented in taking an idea and putting a plan together. You make things come alive in a way that I don't have the vision for. Holly felt her cheeks flush. You had the idea in there. I just helped you pull it out. Well, I'm grateful. Just give me a minute. I'm going to call Logan and see when we can pick a weekend to go away. Holly nodded and watched as he pulled his phone from his pocket. I'll let you make your call. I'm just going to step in this store to look for something. Holly's heart beat an unusual rhythm as she walked into the gift shop. Jordan couldn't be any more attractive to her in that moment, and she needed some space to catch her breath. It was so special to see a man who cared deeply enough to do something like that for his mom. Sure, he needed a little help to figure it out, but in his heart, he just wanted to bring a smile to his mom's face on Christmas morning. That made him seem a little more normal in her eyes. Realizing this was her opportunity, she quickly began scanning the shelves for a gift for her brother and sister-in-law. She had already gotten her parents something, even though they told her not to worry about it this year. She saw the perfect Christmas ornament and picked it up. It was a man and woman in front of a Christmas tree, with a dog that looked just like her brother's dog. As she turned it over in her hand, she saw the sign that said they could personalize the ornaments, and her decision was made. In a few minutes, the woman at the store had written her brother and sister-in-law's names, along with their dog's name, and Christmas with the year on it. It was the perfect, simple gift, and thankfully, it fit into her small budget. As she stepped out of the shop with her bag, she saw Jordan waiting on the bench nearby. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. Logan's assistant already sent me possible dates for a trip, and I'm looking at some vacation rentals. Holly made her way over and sat next to him. They scrolled through a number of destinations and options. Within a short time, they had picked a vacation house, and Jordan completed the booking. Thanks for helping me. I would never have come up with that on my own, and I would have ended up buying her a piece of jewelry that would just go into her collection. You're welcome. But like I said, you had the idea. I think you would have figured it out. Jordan turned to face her, and he put his hand on her arm as his expression turned serious. Holly, I've missed seeing you. She told herself to take a breath, the touch of his hand on her arm making her weak. I've missed you too. It was true, but there was nothing to be done about it. Jordan couldn't redecorate his house every week. Why were you in a hurry to take down the decorations? It's not even Christmas yet. She shrugged. It's part of our contract for me to clean them up, so I wanted to make sure to fulfill our agreement. Does that mean you're ready to be done with me? Holly looked up and met his gaze. It's not that I want to, but our time is over. Your home is beautiful. That was my job, but it's done. Or at least it is, after it's cleaned up and put away. Jordan moved closer to her, drawing her into the moment and his presence. Is that all you want to be between us? A business agreement? She sighed and dropped her gaze to the floor, knowing she couldn't look at him that closely. That is all that's between us. But what if I want there to be more? Jordan asked. Holly let the question hang in the air. She wanted to say yes, that they could be more than that. She wanted to lean into his embrace, but she couldn't let herself. She had seen his world, and she wasn't ready to walk into it. And she didn't want to step aside as he worked at a billion-dollar company and ran a nonprofit with a budget bigger than her entire life. Holly, speaking of travel, Jordan tried changing the subject. I have a trip planned to Africa in January. I'll be there for 2 weeks, and I've been thinking about it. I would love for you to go. Her eyes shot up to his. Really? Africa? Jordan nodded. I have work to do, but it would be no trouble for you to come along. I would really like for you to see what we're doing there. It would be an awesome adventure. Holly couldn't argue with that. She had always liked the idea of traveling, but never had much opportunity. It was in the back of her throat to say she couldn't afford a trip like that, but she knew Jordan could pay for it with no trouble. Despite how nice it would be to say yes, she shook her head. I can't do that. I've got to focus on my business. Thanks to you, I have a number of clients interested in working with me after the first of the year. I've worked so hard, and now I have the opportunity. I can't just leave town. My business won't run itself. Jordan leaned back quickly as if she had injured him. She knew that he took those words personally, but the disappointment in his eyes was clear. I'm sorry to hear that. I was really hoping you would go. Holly sighed. Jordan, I appreciate the offer, but that's not my life. I have to work hard to grow my business. I have bills to pay that I have to do actual work for. No one is going to hand me money while I leave the country. She bit her lip, knowing she should soften her tone. I'm sorry, but it's true. You and I had a nice time together. The truth is, we are very different people, and we live in different worlds. I thought maybe you were the guy at the community event who could be down to earth and real. But you live a life that allows you to do the work you want without any thought to if you can afford it, and you have the freedom to leave the country whenever you want. Maybe it's not who you want to be, but it's who you are. Now that the decorations are done, you will go back to your world, and I will go back to mine. I'm just a girl who grew up in a family where we scraped by for everything, and now I'm a woman struggling to make my business work so I can do the job I love. We're too different, and I'm sorry. She stood abruptly. Jordan, you're a wonderful man, but I just don't think there can be anything more between us. I should go. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. Chapter 12. Holly stared at the open planner on her kitchen table. Christmas was only 2 days away, but she didn't feel very festive. After working at Jordan's house for so many hours, she hadn't taken the time to decorate her own space, and she didn't want to waste her hard-earned money on a Christmas tree at this point, especially for her to be the only one to see it. Thankfully, her work calendar was filling up. She had been right that all she needed was one big client to put her in front of people. After Jordan's event, where she had handed out dozens of business cards, she had several clients interested in working with her. She was booked through January and February, and even had a booking for a 50th birthday party at someone's home. Holly gave a faint smile, looking at all the names and dates written on her calendar. But something was nagging at her. As thrilled as she was for her business to grow, it didn't feel like enough now. She loved her job, but she had been part of something bigger, and the desire to do more hung heavy in her heart. Her time with Jordan had made her see things differently. She wanted to be a part of the kind of charity work he was doing. As she sat in her cozy kitchen, surrounded by swatches of fabric, paint samples, and design plans, her phone buzzed with messages from potential clients eager to secure her services. Yet, her mind was elsewhere. Perhaps with the man who had captured her attention for most of the holiday season and the people he wanted to help. She thought of Jordan, a man who had the means to make a significant impact on the world. He could do anything he wanted. He had money. He could start new businesses, could travel the world for pleasure, or drive fancy cars. Instead, he wanted to help others who needed the most basic of needs. But she and Jordan lived in different worlds. She couldn't simply work for free all the time, dedicating her talents solely to charitable endeavors. Her business was her livelihood, and only now was she starting to see the fruit of her labors. As she thought about what her future might hold, she could envision herself as a successful businesswoman. She would run her own design firm, and maybe even hire other designers to work for her. Maybe one day, she could be in a position to use her work for charity, but that time wasn't now. Right now, she had to focus. Growing her business was the only thing she had time for. Christmas Eve had arrived, and the city was aglow with the spirit of the season. It was a night for families, for gatherings, and for celebrating the warmth of togetherness. Yet, Holly had other plans. After her family celebrated Christmas together that morning, so her brother could go with his wife to her family gathering the next day, Holly went home to her house alone. After a while of sitting around watching a Christmas movie in her undecorated, un-Christmassy house, she decided there must be something else she could do. A quick search on her phone told her of several charities that had volunteer needs on Christmas Eve. She grabbed her keys and headed out the door. She shivered as she walked from her parked car the few blocks to the homeless shelter. There was the threat of snow this evening, and she was sure the shelter would be full of men and women who could use some Christmas cheer and a hot meal. Inside the shelter, she wrinkled her nose. The smell of soup and bread would have been delightful, but there was a pungent smell mingled with it. She swallowed and told herself she could do this for one night. These people didn't have a place to go or food to eat, no matter the reason. Tonight, she could give back a fraction of what she had been given in life. Holly walked to the woman standing at the front of the room wearing a name tag and introduced herself. "I'm Holly. I'm here to volunteer." "Welcome, Holly," the woman said. "And Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," Holly said. "I'm Terry Meadows, the shelter director. We're so happy to have you." "I'm happy to help. What can I do?" "We'll start serving in about 10 minutes. The food is prepared, so you can grab an apron and pick a spot in the serving line. As the people come through, you'll serve them. We try very hard to make everyone feel welcome. So just put on your friendly face and try to speak to as many of them as possible. They may not reply, but they hear you." "Sounds good," Holly smiled. "I think I can handle that." "Wonderful. Thank you for being here. After everyone is served, we encourage you to find a table and talk to some people. It's encouraging for them to be treated like people." Holly nodded. "I understand." "Later on, we have a little gift for each of the guests. They were sent over this afternoon by a donor, and we're so thrilled to have something to give them on Christmas Eve." "That's very nice," Holly said. Her spirits felt lifted to be helping out here tonight and being a small part of bringing Christmas to people in need. "Aprons are in the kitchen," Terry said. Holly thanked her as she moved toward the back where Terry had pointed. She moved through the swinging door into the kitchen and entered in a flurry of activity. At least a dozen people were working in the kitchen. A man loudly greeted her as he moved past carrying a large pot of soup. Another woman walked by carrying a tray of bread and crackers. Holly smiled. This was exactly where she wanted to be tonight. She walked to the rack of aprons and picked one up. She slipped it over her head as she walked back to the serving area and eased up to the table. Maybe she could ladle soup or just help with the bread. Maybe people who volunteered all the time had a particular spot that they liked. She didn't want to step on anyone's toes when she was here to help. "Hey, I'm Shannon," a woman said as she set a bowl of salad on the table and reached out to shake her hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Holly." "First time?" Shannon asked. Holly smiled. "Is it that obvious?" Shannon laughed. "Nah, I just haven't seen you before. I know most of the volunteers." "Definitely not your first time then." "Nowhere close. As a matter of fact, my first time here, I was out there in that line." Holly blinked rapidly, trying to hide her surprise. "Really?" "Yep. I made a lot of bad decisions and ended up here. Terry was the first face I saw that night. She smiled and welcomed me, which was good, because as hungry as I was 2 seconds away from running out the door. I was finally ashamed of where I was and needed help. Terry sat and talked with me that night, and I'll always be grateful. I kept coming back, and Terry helped me get on my feet. Now I have a good job and a place to live. But I'll spend every holiday here working the food line, praying that someone comes in and I can help them." "Wow," Holly said, blinking back tears. That's amazing. It doesn't work that way for everyone, but I'll always be here in case the next me is in line. That's so wonderful. I'm sure they appreciate your help. We appreciate everyone who comes. Now then, are you ready for this? Christmas Eve is one of our busiest nights of the year. Holly took a big breath and blew it out. I think so. Any tips? Should I pick a certain spot? Wherever you want to go. Although I will tell you, they always love the lady who is serving dessert, Shannon said with a wink. Holly smiled and quickly stepped up to the spot in front of the desserts. I like to make a good first impression. Good choice, Shannon said. She moved in front of the soup and picked up a ladle. I like to prep a few bowls before the line starts moving so we can keep the line going. Smart. Holly started cutting the brownies on the tray in front of her. She was intent on her work and moved quickly as Terry announced she was going to open the front door. Holly was ready and excited to serve. She didn't look up as the other volunteers took their places in the line. Those brownies look amazing! Holly froze, recognizing the voice of the man who stood beside her. Slowly, she turned and drug her eyes up to his. Hi, Jordan, she said, her voice almost a whisper. I didn't expect to see you here. He flashed a smile that brightened the room and threatened to break her heart. I didn't expect to see you. Suddenly, a thought occurred to her. Terry said the gifts came in today from a donor. She subtly pointed to him. Shh, Jordan said. I'm supposed to be anonymous. Besides, it was the company. I'm not here for Bradford Publishing. I'm just here to serve some food and wish people a Merry Christmas. Holly paused to look at him. His face was serious and sincere. Of course, that's why he was here. There was no agenda for Jordan. He truly wanted to help people. That's why I'm here too. Jordan smiled. Then let's get to it. He took his place beside her and prepared to hand out bread and crackers for the soup. Holly wasn't sure she could take the close proximity. But as they started work, they greeted the people in line and made small talk. They bumped arms every so often as they worked alongside each other, and before long they were laughing and singing along to the Christmas carols that played from a speaker in the corner. The time flew past, and even though the line had been long, they served all the men and women quickly. Terry came and told several of the volunteers they were relieved to go and talk. Shannon and another woman stayed to serve anyone who came in later or needed seconds. Holly hated to admit that she was disappointed to move away from Jordan, but she wanted to help and fulfill her commitment. Shannon's words kept echoing in her mind. She wasn't sure what she might say to the people at the tables. She only hoped she could show kindness to one person. Finding an empty seat at a table with two women, she sat down. It felt awkward at first, but Holly introduced herself and asked their names. Then somehow she just kept asking them questions, and they kept talking. When the women excused themselves to leave, Holly said she hoped she would see them here again soon, and she meant it. After tonight, she knew she would be back to help in the future. As the evening drew to a close, the volunteers and those they had served gathered for a moment of reflection and gratitude. From the tables where they sat, they sang Christmas carols that echoed with the spirit of the season. Holly was so moved by the event that she excused herself from the table to get a tissue. She escaped to the kitchen and found what she was looking for. When she emerged through the swinging door, Jordan was there. Are you all right? He asked. Holly's eyes filled with tears again. Yes, I'm fine. It's just so different from any other Christmas I've ever known. These people aren't asking for much. Just a simple meal and a warm place to sit for a few hours. I've always thought because my family didn't have a lot that we were scraping by, and I knew I would have to work hard to achieve any kind of success. But Jordan, I've been so fortunate, and I didn't even know it. We may not have had the most expensive things, but we never went hungry. We never went without clothes or school supplies. I think I see now what you meant when you said it's hard to have Christmas and know so many people are in need. Jordan reached out and took her hands in his. It is hard, isn't it? I struggled with it for a long time, but I think I was looking at it wrong too. We don't have to throw away what we have. The important thing is to look for ways to help, share what we have with others, and always be grateful. Holly sniffed. I just want to help. I want to do more. Jordan smiled. I have lots of plans. It would mean the world to me for you to be part of them. Holly considered this. Something inside told her that was exactly what she needed to do. I would love that. Jordan stepped close. Holly, he said, keeping her hands in his. I feel like we share these feelings, and it's not just a coincidence. There is more than just a business agreement between us, and if you'll let me, I would like to explore that more. Holly bit her lip. I'm sorry, Jordan. I know I'm the one who put distance between us this time. I was afraid. I didn't want it to be like high school all over again. What do you mean? He asked. We spent that time together, and I really thought we were getting to know each other and becoming friends, or maybe something more. But you went back to your friends and your life, and it was as if I didn't exist. I was afraid it was going to be the same now. I don't know how I can fit into the life you live. We had different lives growing up, and our lives are different now. I'm struggling to get my business off the ground while you spend weeks in Africa. How will that work? Holly, Jordan whispered quietly, I have never wondered for a moment how you might fit into my life, because all I can think about is finding ways to be more like you and how we can make our lives work together. Holly smiled through the tears filling her eyes. Really? Yes, really. I think we've made a good team in decorating and in planning the local charity event. And tonight we worked great serving alongside each other. I think we can be a good partnership in more than just work and charity. Holly nodded. I think so too. Jordan grinned. That's all I needed to hear. Chapter 13. Holly sat curled up on Jordan's couch with a mug of hot apple cider in her hands. Christmas music quietly played through his surround sound stereo speakers, and she stared at the Christmas tree that she had decorated weeks ago. Holly, dear, Mrs. Bradford said, taking a seat next to her. This house is incredible. You have such a talent. I hope you'll help me with my house next year. I've never hired a decorator for Christmas. I guess I wanted it to be a family event where we sing Christmas carols and put up the tree. But the boys are past that now. Besides, she paused and gave Holly a wink. Maybe you'll be family. Holly felt her cheeks flush, and she cast a quick glance at Jordan, who was adding another log to the fire. I would be thrilled to help you. I'm sure your home is lovely. I was surprised when Jordan said you were all gathering here for Christmas morning. Oh, the location doesn't matter to me. I just want my family to be together. Holly smiled, knowing Jordan's mother was going to love her Christmas gift. I think that's the best way to look at it. Besides, we couldn't let all this beauty go to waste. We wanted to spend Christmas in this beautiful space you created. Thank you. I'm just glad everyone can enjoy it. Now, Jordan stepped in front of the Christmas tree and clapped his hands together, getting everyone's attention. Who's ready to open some presents? He grinned like a little kid. I think that's a wonderful idea, Mrs. Bradford said, standing from her seat. We have a few things for you boys. She moved to the Christmas tree and pulled out 2 boxes each with Jordan and Logan's names on them. Jordan took a seat next to Holly and accepted his gift. Thanks, Mom. Holly, I'm so sorry. I didn't know until this morning that you were joining us, Mrs. Bradford said. Holly waved a hand in the air. Please don't apologize. She looked at Jordan and smiled. Besides, I didn't know myself until last night. You couldn't have prepared for that. Well, I will have something special for you next time I see you. You don't have to do that. Being here with all of you is very special, Holly said. I hope we'll all have many special times together in the future, Jordan added. Holly beamed as she smiled at him. All right then, Logan spoke up. Mom, should we open them at the same time? Yes, definitely, she answered. Jordan and Logan worked to unwrap the boxes together. Holly peered over Jordan's shoulder as he opened the gift. Whoa, Jordan said as he looked inside. He reached in and unfolded a large quilt onto his and Holly's laps. Is this what I think it is? Yes, his mom said, folding her hands together under her chin. I've kept all your old t-shirts and jerseys in boxes up in the attic for as long as I can remember. I finally decided it was the year to do something with them. This is my senior trip shirt, Jordan pointed out, and my Little League jersey from the year we won the state championships. It's my student council shirt, Logan said. Oh man, I forgot about this shirt. It was my favorite when I was in 7th grade. Do you like it? Their mom asked. This is great, Mom. I loved all these shirts as a kid. Now I can wrap up in them and keep them forever, Jordan said. Oh, I'm so glad. I was afraid maybe it was a little cheesy. Jordan stood and went to hug her. Not cheesy at all. Even if it is, I don't care. It means a lot to me. Me too, Mom, Logan agreed as he gave her his own hug. Maybe you should have opened the other box first, their mom said. It's not quite as personal as that one. It's a few things I would have put in your stocking if you were home. Candy and lotions and things. Is there a toothbrush? Logan asked with a twinkle in his eyes. And toothpaste too? Jordan asked. Holly gave them a funny look. Mrs. Bradford laughed. You'll have to open it and see. The men dug into the boxes and laughed with glee as they each held up a toothbrush and toothpaste. Thanks, Mom. I'm sure I needed a new one, Jordan said. He looked to Holly. Mom used to always put a toothbrush and toothpaste in our stockings at Christmas. It kind of became a running joke, Logan said. We would get all this candy, so we said she wanted to make sure we didn't get cavities for Christmas. Mrs. Bradford shrugged. I just put it in there one year, and they made such a big deal about it that I kept doing it. But we always had them brush their teeth on Christmas night with a brand new toothbrush. That sounds like a special memory, Holly said. We have lots of great memories, Jordan said, and I hope we will make plenty more. He stood and moved to the tree where he picked up an envelope. Mom, this is for you. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. She took the envelope and peeled back the flap. Jordan put his arm around Holly, and together they watched her open it. She pulled out the piece of paper, unfolded it, and gasped. Oh! Her other hand flew to her face. Really? She asked, looking back and forth between Jordan and Logan. Really, Jordan answered. We've already blocked it off on our calendars. Logan sat with his wife Eva. We're all excited to spend the time together, Eva said. Oh, this is so wonderful, Mrs. Bradford said. It's all I could have ever asked for. I can't take all the credit, Jordan said. Holly came up with the idea. No, Holly said. You had the idea to do something really special for your mom. I just helped pull the idea out. Well, I'm so grateful, Mrs. Bradford said. I can't wait. I can't imagine anything more wonderful today, Mrs. Bradford said. She stood and hugged each of her sons. I'm so proud of both of you. You're both so different, but you're making a difference in the world in your own ways. I love you. Jordan returned to his seat next to Holly and took her hand in his. This is certainly turning out to be the best Christmas ever. The family had enjoyed the morning together. After they exchanged gifts, they sat around the fire sharing memories of Christmases past. Jordan hoped they would have many more happy memories in the future, but he was also happy to steal away from them to get some time with Holly. He gathered a couple of blankets and asked her to follow him to the front porch. They settled in on the outdoor love seat, and Jordan tucked a blanket around them. You know, I've been impressed with the whole house, but this is my favorite part of the decor. Holly smiled. Mine too. It's so cozy. And it's even better at night when the lights come on. That was the idea, Holly said. I wish I could wait until then, but I'm too excited to give you your Christmas gift. Oh, you didn't have to get me a gift, Holly said. I wanted to. I got you something too. Holly dropped her gaze to her hands folded in her lap. I wasn't sure if I would get a chance to give it to you. Jordan reached for her hands and took them in his. I'm glad you're here. There's no one I would rather spend Christmas with. I'm glad to be with you too. I just wasn't sure if there could be something more between us. Our lives are so different. But they don't have to be. You want to grow your business, and I completely respect that. I also think we have so much in common in how we want to help others, and I would really like it if you work with me on the foundation. It doesn't have to be full-time. Anytime you want to help, you have an open door. I've been thinking about that, Holly laughed. I was up half the night making lists and spreadsheets. I can't leave the country at the drop of a hat for a month at a time. But I think I've put together a business plan that will allow me to take on a certain number of clients and also help with your local charity work. Jordan's heart soared to hear those words. I would love that. Holly looked into his eyes. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to move forward with you to find out. Holly, this Christmas season has been different than any other year I can remember. For a long time, all I could see was frivolous spending, gifts that didn't matter, and people who were too busy running around town to stop and see others. Then you showed up at my house. I thought you were just going to spend some money and put up some decorations. But everything you touched had so much meaning. You took my house and turned it into a home for the holidays. And you took my vision for the foundation and somehow made it come alive in the form of decorations. You helped me see that there is more I can do to help, and you also helped me see the holiday as a meaningful time of celebration with people that I love. Holly smiled at him, but blinked back tears. What I'm trying to say is, Holly, I loved Christmas this year, but it's because of you. I love everything about the holiday this year. But most of all, Holly, I love you. Oh, Jordan, I love you too. I think I knew it the first time you told me about your trip to Africa. I love that you care so much, and you want to help people. I have loved every moment of this Christmas spent with you. I plan to spend plenty more Christmases with you, Jordan said. Then he couldn't wait any longer. He pulled her to himself, he leaned his face close to hers, and held her there for just a moment. Their eyes locked, and Jordan was sure he could see the future there. He closed the distance between them, and their lips met for the first time. Jordan felt a rush of emotions that he had never experienced before. He could feel the passion building inside him as he deepened the kiss. All of time seemed to have stopped, and all that mattered was this moment with her. She responded to his kiss with equal intensity, her arms wrapping around his neck as she pulled him in closer. Jordan pulled her close, feeling warm inside despite the cold temperature. He had never known such strong desire before. Breaking away for a moment, they looked at each other, their eyes reflecting the emotion and connection between them. Jordan knew that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her, and he could see the same feeling in her eyes. Jordan, I want to be with you, she said softly. Jordan kissed her again, just once, and tenderly this time. That's the only Christmas gift I'll ever need. Epilogue. Holly sat and watched as Jordan spoke to the group serving in Africa for the week. She would never get tired of seeing him here in his element. They sat in a circle together, some drinking coffee from tin cups, while others helped wash the dishes from their dinner. The beauty of Africa had already stolen her heart, and she understood why Jordan longed to be here whenever he was in the States. Still, it was hard to adjust to the primitive conditions, and Holly had cried into her pillow the first night thinking of all the people they had met who had so many needs. Does anyone have any questions about tomorrow? Jordan asked the group. What's for breakfast? One of the male college students asked. Laughter lilted around the circle. Jordan joined in. Don't worry. We'll feed you before you head off to work, but I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise. Any other questions? When no one spoke up, he continued. All right then. Enjoy your evening, but don't stay up too late. We've got a busy day tomorrow. In case I haven't said it today, we're so grateful you're here. The work we're doing is changing lives here. So thank you for being part of that. When he finished speaking, he made his way over and sat next to Holly on the wooden camp stools. Hey, he said. How are you doing? Hey, to you too. I'm fine. Thanks for asking. I'm sorry I've been busy today. I wish I could stay with you all day. It's all right, Holly said, reaching for his hand. You have a lot to do. I'm happy to come along, and it's been great for me to get a glimpse of the mission work here. I knew we wouldn't be able to spend every second together. Well, I certainly wish we could. I'm happy to see you do the work you love, Holly said. And I'm thrilled for you to be here. I'm done for the night now. Would you like to sneak away for a little walk? Holly's eyes grew wide. Is it safe to move away from the camp? We won't go far, but I'd like to have you to myself for a few minutes. I would love that too, as long as you're sure it's all right. Of course, come on. He stood and tugged her up from her seat. Walk with me. He nodded at one of the other group leaders and pointed the direction they were going. It didn't take long to escape the noise and light of the campsite. Holly held on tight to Jordan's hand as they moved into the darkness. "I really am so glad you're here, Holly," he said. She turned to face him. "Me too. I'm glad I could make it work around my schedule. And now that Lisa came on board as my administrative assistant, I know I won't miss out on any business while I'm away." "That was a smart decision." "Yeah," Holly waved a hand in the air. "But let's not talk about work." She stepped in front of him and moved close until her back touched his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her. Tilting her head up at the sky, she pointed. "Just look at all those stars. It's just like you said. They look so different here." "I know. I never cease to be amazed by them. Every trip it's like they're even more beautiful than the last time." "I believe you. It reminds me of your front porch at Christmas. I wanted to capture the feeling of staring at the stars. Only nothing I decorated could ever compare to this." Jordan pulled her close and kissed her cheek. "I still love what you did with the porch. All your designs are incredible." Holly smiled. That's high praise coming from the man whose house was basically a blank canvas. "I was just waiting for you to come along." "I'm glad." Jordan moved around her and took her hands in his as he faced her. "Holly, these past months together have changed my life. These stars? They're brighter, more vivid than they are at home. Just like the way you've illuminated my life since the moment I met you. You made me see life through a different lens, and you challenged me to do more of the work that I love, but could never dream of." As Jordan spoke, he reached into his pocket, revealing a small, delicate box. With a heartfelt smile, he opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Holly, you've shown me a love that I never could have imagined, and I'm beyond happy that you want to share in the work that I do. I love you." Holly gasped in surprise, her eyes filling with tears of joy. Jordan continued, his voice trembling with emotion. "Holly, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to continue this incredible journey we've started together. So, I have to ask you something." He knelt down on one knee, presenting the ring to her. "Holly, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in adventure, in love, and in making a difference in this world?" Overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment and the depth of Jordan's love, Holly nodded, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, Jordan, yes!" With the brilliant stars twinkling over them, Jordan slid the ring onto Holly's finger. Then he stood and took her in his arms. He kissed her under the African sky, each brush of their lips full of the promise of a beautiful future together. When they pulled apart, Holly was the first to speak. "I love you, Jordan. I hope you know that you've changed my life, too. I never knew I wanted to do charity work, and I certainly never knew I wanted to go to Africa. But you've introduced me to them, and I'll never go back to who I was before. I can't wait to spend the rest of our lives working together and sharing in this mission." She paused and stared at the ring on her finger. "We're getting married," she shouted. Jordan laughed. "Yes, we are, and I couldn't be happier. Let's go back and tell everyone." "Let's wait just a few more minutes. I want you to myself a little bit longer," Holly said. "I will never argue with that." He tucked her into his arms, and once again they gazed up at the stars. Without a word, they enjoyed the beauty of the night and the comfort of each other's presence. As the African wilderness whispered around them, Holly dreamed of their future together, filled with love, adventure, and the shared purpose of making a difference in the world. This has been Billionaire Under the Christmas Lights by Hannah Jo Abbott. Ready for more clean Christian romance stories. To see all available titles by the author, visit www.hannahjoabbott.com.